So Avengers Infinity War has just released, and all I have to say is, for the record, that's a good sign, not a bad one. Like one from exhaustion and not from disappointment and frustration. Right at the top, I want to say that what I'm going to break down requires me to spoil not just Infinity War, but everything else that has come before. I would recommend not watching this video if you haven't seen Infinity War, and definitely not if you haven't seen any of the movies if you plan to. All I'm saying is that I'm not going to hold anything back while doing this. So just a blanket spoiler warning for all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films. Once again, spoiler alert, spoilers are going to happen. Don't say I didn't warn you. Also, if you have seen Infinity War, please don't ruin it for the people that haven't. Don't be a dick. Hashtag Thanos demands your silence. Anyway, a lot happened in Infinity War, and I mean a lot. It was an awesome roller coaster, and I do plan on seeing it at least one more time. And despite the fact that the movie is over, the overall story arc is still ongoing, but it still can't be denied that this film was a huge milestone for the entirety of the MCU, having been building to this moment for the last 18 movies over the last 10 years. And now that it is over, we are left wondering, what now? What is next for this franchise? To answer that, we need to take a look at what is coming up in the most immediate future. Currently, there are 4 movies planned over the next year or so. Later this year on July 6th is Ant-Man and the Wasp. Then next year on March 8th, we have Captain Marvel, followed soon after by Avengers 4 or Infinity War 2, depending on how you look at it, on May 3rd. And then finally, we get a sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming on July 5th to finish out the year for 2019. One thing people are wondering about is if Ant-Man and the Wasp takes place before or after Avengers 3. Ant-Man does not appear in the movie, along with Hawkeye, after apparently having made a deal with the government to just not do hero stuff anymore for the sake of their families. It is possible that the movie takes place before, although I feel like during the movie, Scott Lang will break free of this, for lack of a better phrase, house arrest, which makes the explanation of his absence said in Infinity War make little sense. Now, in Infinity War, Thanos gains all of the Infinity Stones and snaps his fingers to kill half the population of the universe, resulting in the deaths of most of the cast members. But notice that I said most and not all, so there were survivors. It could be possible that the cast members for Ant-Man and the Wasp just simply survived Thanos' cleansing, and therefore allowing the movie to take place. This also makes sense since Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly are rumored to appear in Avengers 4 as their respective characters, so it fits with the timeline as to why Ant-Man and the Wasp don't appear in Avengers 3 but do show up for Avengers 4. It's because Ant-Man and the Wasp takes place after Infinity War. But who knows for sure? Well, I guess we'll find out in July. The end credit scene in Infinity War hints at Captain Marvel when Nick Fury watches Maria Hill vanish before his eyes and uses a beacon pager thing to call Carol Danvers back to Earth just before he himself vanishes. Now, Captain Marvel is one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel universe. Think of her as like a cosmic Superman, and it is clear from this scene that she is being built up as the savior for the MCU. The Captain Marvel movie will take place primarily in the 90s, and likely going over her origins while she battles against the Skrulls, which are a race of green shape-shifting aliens. It's been confirmed that Samuel L. Jackson will be appearing in the film as a younger, two-eyed Nick Fury, who will likely form a friendship with Captain Marvel just before she goes into space for reasons I'm sure we will find out about, leaving behind a device for Fury to use to call her should the need arise. What's weird is how Fury has had this device the whole time and never once used it, including the battle for New York when Thanos sent an army to invade the planet and obtain the Tesseract. What I feel is that whatever sent Captain Marvel off-world was so demanding that Fury wouldn't dare call her even if he wanted to. But then you could say that since he had already gathered the Avengers, that maybe he didn't feel like he had to call her before this point now that Thanos' purge is happening. Now we can hazard a guess as to what the main plot of her movie will be about, considering that not only Skrulls have been announced, but also Lee Pace has been confirmed to reprise his role as Ronan the Accuser. This suggests that the film will cover the Kree-Skrull conflict from the comics. I'm sure that one of the final scenes for Captain Marvel, maybe a post-credit scene, will show Carol Danvers receiving Nick Fury's SOS beacon and lead directly into Infinity War 2. Speaking of Infinity War 2, originally the rumor was that the 4th Avengers movie would feature a Skrull invasion, which is something that they did in the comics known as Secret Invasion. More on that later. And while that still could be teased in a post-credit scene, considering the ending of Infinity War, I feel that this movie will act more as a continuation and conclusion to that arc, with maybe Avengers 5 doing the Secret Invasion story. In this movie, we will see the original cast of the Avengers teaming up to reverse Thanos' damage, which will certainly be aided by Captain Marvel. Now, when I say reverse, I mean that they will either use the Time Stone to undo all of the deaths, or all of the lives lost by the snap were stored away in the Soul Stone. We've seen this happen before in the comics, and we've seen it happen before in the movie when Thanos converses with a younger Gamora after he does his snap. It wouldn't surprise me if they went this way as a way of reversing all of the deaths caused by Thanos' snap. This would, of course, bring back everyone who was killed by the snap and not before, which means Loki, Heimdall, and Vision will all likely remain dead. Now, if you've seen Infinity War, you might have noticed that I left out Gamora. I feel that if the previously mentioned is true, I wouldn't be surprised if Gamora was also revived, seeing as she was sacrificed to the Soul Stone in order for Thanos to retrieve it, which explains why she is the entity that Thanos converses with after the snap happens, because her soul is currently in it. Also, I feel like there's a good chance that they end up rebuilding Vision, since they made a point to say in Infinity War that Vision is more than just the Mind Stone, and technically he doesn't need it. And with characters like Tony Stark, Bruce Banner, and Shuri surviving the movie, it's pretty realistic to say that they would all figure out a way for Vision to return, giving him his solar jewel that he has in the comics instead of an Infinity Stone. Now, I keep talking about how the deaths will be reversed, and that's because there is no way they will leave Black Panther, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Groot, and a lot of the other newer characters dead, because many of them have their own movie sequels coming out in the future. So a retconning of the deaths is pretty inevitable. This kind of sets up a very poetic passing of the torch from the original cast to the newer cast. In Marvel Phase 4, I am certain that we will see a lot of the newer cast taking center stage while the older cast takes a step back, or maybe even taking a step away completely. This also raises the question of which of the original cast will die. I feel that characters like Captain America and Iron Man are an easy bet. I'm pretty certain that Cap is going to die, allowing for Bucky to take up the mantle for future films, especially since after Infinity War 2, Sebastian Stan still has 4 more movies left on his contract. And while I really do wish to see Iron Man in a future Guardians of the Galaxy movie, considering that he has hung out with them in the comics before, it would again be poetic if Cap and Iron Man put their differences from Civil War aside and sacrifice themselves together to save the newer cast. This is where I'm gonna stop predicting deaths, because I could keep going, but then this video would just never end. It'll just keep going and going and going. Just know that there will be more deaths, and I mean actual deaths, in Infinity War 2. Of course, Thanos will ultimately be defeated in the movie, likely by an Infinity Gauntlet wearing Captain Marvel, who will use the gauntlet to reverse the damage done by Thanos' snap to bring back all of those who faded away at the end of Infinity War, and whose souls are currently trapped within the Soul Stone, including Gamora. This was a role that originally belonged to that of Adam Warlock from the comics, who is a character that was teased during a post-credit scene at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So where do we go from here? Well, I mentioned before that some of the dead characters have future movies planned, one of which is Spider-Man, who has a sequel to Homecoming scheduled on July 5th, 2019. This is a movie that we don't have a ton of information on, but judging from Homecoming's post-credit scene where they formally introduce Mac Gargan, who later becomes Scorpion, they might end up going in a different direction with another villain. But before the Marvel-Sony deal for Spider-Man, Sony did try to create their own universe with Spider-Man characters, which did include a Sinister Six movie. And yeah, Scorpion was never really a part of Sinister Six in the comics. That doesn't mean that he can't be a member in the films, but that's even if they decide to go that route. But back when an MCU Spider-Man movie was announced, the original rumors pinned Kraven the Hunter as the villain, who is yet to appear in a movie, so that could also be a possibility. And he was also a regular member of the Sinister Six, so just saying. Speaking of the Marvel-Sony deal, I feel like we have to address the Venom movie, which will be coming out later this year on October 5th. The question people keep asking is if Venom is in the MCU or not. I think we have to look at it in the same way we look at the Netflix and television Marvel properties. They're technically in the same universe as the MCU films, but don't expect a crossover. This kind of bums me out because then that pins Venom as more of a Sony movie than a Marvel movie, which means that we won't end up seeing Tom Holland as Spider-Man going up against Tom Hardy's Venom, which is the confrontation that I always loved as a kid, and one that Spider-Man 3 screwed up. Now, there are rumors that Tom Holland was on set for Venom, likely to film a cameo scene. What I think is that if this is true, then it is a post-credit scene, and I mean post-credit, so If the movie ends up being bad, Marvel can make the decision to axe the Tom Holland end credit scene and therefore not have any evidence of Venom in the MCU. Although, if this is true, it would be weird as to where the movie takes place in the MCU timeline, since currently Spider-Man is dead. If I had to place a bet, I would say that the Tom Holland being on set rumor is just simply a rumor, and we will not be seeing him in the Venom movie. This means that Venom is just like the other Marvel properties on Netflix and TV, that technically it is in the MCU, but we will not be seeing a crossover with the other MCU films, and that is just pretty lame. Beyond these 4 films, or 5 if you count Venom, Marvel Studios has also released 9 additional dates that they have planted their flag on for future movie releases. In 2020, there's May 1st, July 21st, and November 6th. And then in 2021, we have May 7th, July 30th, and November 5th. Finally, in 2022, we have February 18th, May 6th, and July 29th, with more dates planned for the next 10 years, but we'll likely not hear about those movies anytime soon, as Marvel knows to not get ahead of themselves, unlike a certain other company. Now, we can begin to speculate what those movies might be. For one thing, Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn has talked about a 3rd installment, but we won't be getting that until beyond 2019, which just so happens to land at any point within these 9 dates. This makes sense to introduce characters like Adam Warlock, who, as I mentioned earlier, was teased in a post-credit scene for Guardians 2 when the Sovereign Priestess Aisha created a being that she referred to as Adam for the purpose of destroying the Guardians. This leads to the safe assumption that Adam Warlock will be introduced as a possible villain. There will no doubt be a Black Panther 2, especially after the incredible success of the first Black Panther earlier this year. Michael Pena has also hinted at the possibility of an Ant-Man 3, and staying on the topic of 3s, saying that there will be a Spider-Man 3 is also a safe bet. Whether it will be within these next few years is another story. There are also rumors of a possible Black Widow solo movie, which I personally find interesting. Earlier, we spoke about the possibility of a Skrull Secret Invasion story arc. It is an arc about how people on Earth, including members of the Avengers, were replaced by Skrulls whose shape-shifting abilities are so detailed that they can even mimic an individual's DNA. If this storyline is explored, you could see big names like Captain America, Iron Man, Hawkeye, Ant-Man, or Black Widow be revealed as Skrulls. I predict that Infinity War 2 might result in a certain death that reveals that that person is a Skrull. You might think to yourself, why would a Skrull fight with the Avengers and die for them? Well, in the comics, some Skrulls are so deep undercover that they don't even realize that they are Skrulls. They truly believe that they are whoever they are disguised as. This would result in an interesting story arc following Infinity War, as it would have the cast very paranoid and not trusting each other. And I'm not just talking about Avengers, but even the side characters they surround themselves with. It's basically a movie that will test a lot of the relationships that we have been seeing develop over the last 18 movies, or, however many movies will be out by the time that this comes out. But why mention this when talking about a Black Widow solo film? While this may admittedly be a far-fetched prediction, I think that the Black Widow we currently have is a Skrull and has been the entire time. In the comics, Black Widow was originally a villain before she changed her ways and joined the Avengers. A similar backstory is hinted at in Avengers 1 and 2 when Natasha speaks to Loki about wanting to wipe Red from her ledger, but also seeing her being trained in a flashback/vision during Age of Ultron. Natasha only changed her ways after Hawkeye was sent to kill her, but instead decided to spare her, which led to her joining S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers and blah 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 blah. The interesting thing is that we have never seen a villainous Black Widow on screen, and I think it would be interesting if it was revealed that she has been a Skrull the entire time, and then when her solo movie comes out, it is about the real Black Widow in the present day, who is a villain and acts as an antagonist for future films. Films like the also rumored Hawkeye solo movie, which I don't believe will happen, but also the possible Captain America 4 starring Bucky. Speaking of that movie, which again may or may not happen, it's also another bold prediction, but during a scene in Infinity War when Thanos attempts to retrieve the Soul Stone, he encounters the Red Skull. The Red Skull was transported by the Tesseract when he held it in the first Captain America movie, and was apparently cursed to, I want to say guard the Soul Stone, but he's not really guarding it as much as he is just overseeing it or acting as a guide who passes knowledge to whoever wants to claim the Soul Stone as to how to be able to do that. Now, the exact specifics of the curse isn't 100% clear, but it does seem as if the Infinity Stones have punished him for his meddling, as he now oversees the site of the Soul Stone. But once Thanos retrieves the Soul Stone, there are two possible outcomes. One, the Red Skull is freed to die, or two, he is free to to leave and do as he wishes. If that is the case, it wouldn't be surprising to see him reemerge as a rival to Bucky's Captain America, but again, it's a bold theory. So what else? Well, we have to assume that one of the dates is Avengers 5, which we've already discussed, and considering the post-credit scene in Doctor Strange where Mordo goes bad as he declares that there are just too many sorcerers in the world, you have to assume that the two characters will eventually come to blows in a sequel. But we also have to consider the Disney-Fox merger, where Disney gained the rights to most of the Fox movie TV rights. This includes the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. Now, Fox still has X-Men projects in production, projects like Deadpool 2, New Mutants, and X-Men Dark Phoenix. Disney will likely allow those projects to finish and release before beginning to factor in those properties into the MCU, but you can bet that they will eventually be included. There's a chance we won't be seeing those movies until at the earliest 2020, and that's being ambitious. More realistically, since the deal is still taking time to finalize, legal stuff that I don't understand and all that, we won't see those movies until 2021. But it would be interesting if Marvel could fast-track some of this to allow for X-Men and the Fantastic Four to be recasted and included in future Marvel films. For example, did you know that Black Panther was once married to Storm in the comics? What would be awesome, and a future wink at things to come, is the beginning of these characters being sprinkled into the MCU, like Storm's inclusion in Black Panther 2, or Wolverine in a future Cat movie where he and Bucky recognize each other. Little things like that. Now, some people believe that Marvel will adopt the continuity of the existing X-Men franchise by introducing a multiverse plot, but I feel like that would be too messy. Just say that the mutants were a new development. Maybe Thanos' snap had an effect on the surviving population, which caused mutants to suddenly be a thing. Maybe some mutants existed before, but were underground until suddenly something forced them to reveal themselves. I mean, there are a lot of possibilities of introducing them, but I would love it if they kept Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. You don't need to keep the rest of the cast, but I feel it would just be too perfect to have Deadpool as the only character that realizes that something has changed. Now, the Fantastic Four would fit very snug with the next phase for Marvel as it continues to take steps towards the cosmos with more Guardians of the Galaxy and Captain Marvel, who will also likely get a sequel with one of these dates. I actually believe that if Infinity War 2 has the original cast stepping aside for the newer cast, that a new leader for the Avengers will need to step up, and that leader is Captain Marvel. She has led the Avengers before in the comics, and being a strong female character, it would be dumb to not embrace her properly. Actually, Fantastic Four and X-Men open up many doors for the cosmic stuff. Dark Phoenix, the Silver Surfer, Galactus, and Kang the Conqueror. Just get used to the idea of Avengers in space because that is the future of the MCU. So let's recap. We have 9 dates and how many movies? Well, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Black Panther 2, Captain Marvel 2, Doctor Strange 2, X-Men, The Fantastic Four, a possible Black Widow solo film, a possible Sebastian Stan Captain America 4, Ant-Man 3, Spider-Man 3, and of course Avengers 5. So what is my super awesome lineup that could possibly, but will likely not be correct because Marvel will probably introduce newer characters that I haven't thought of? For 2020, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 will release on May 1st with Adam Warlock as the villain. On July 21st, we will get The Fantastic Four. Marvel will likely fast-track the Fantastic Four's movie rights to allow for more cosmic doors to open. Then Doctor Strange 2 will release on November 6th, where Doctor Strange battles his old comrade Mordo. On May 7th, we will see Black Panther 2 kicking off the 2021 summer movies with a possible introduction to Storm, who will be the first hint at a coming X-Men movie. Then on July 30th, we will get that X-Men movie when we finally get the Uncanny X-Men as they are officially and formally introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Then on November 5th, we get Captain Marvel 2 as she continues to carry the flag as the new leader of the Avengers, taking us directly into Avengers Secret Invasion as the Avengers battle against a Skrull invasion attempt on May 6th the following year. Now, you might have noticed that I left out 2 dates and did not mention Captain America 4 and the standalone Black Widow film. That's because I don't believe those movies will be happening within these next 9 dates. I feel that instead, Marvel will focus on some newer characters instead of looking to create movies on pre-existing characters. Instead, I present 2 names, Nova and Namor. After his possible introduction in Guardians 3, Nova will receive his own solo film prior to Avengers 5 on February 18th, 2022. As for Namor, who is categorized as a mutant, after the X-Men have been introduced, Marvel will begin to explore separate mutant characters to help bolster the movie ranks. It would be likely that Namor is introduced in the Fantastic Four, seeing as it was in the Fantastic Four comics that Namor saw his debut as a villainous character. This would also explore a brand new story with a Fantastic Four movie, and then eventually he will receive his own movie on July 29th to wrap up the year of 2022. And those are my super bold and probably incorrect predictions. These are, of course, all my opinion. And frankly, I can't wait for Marvel to do an event and reveal Phase 4 like they did with Phase 3 and for me to be all sorts of wrong. But seriously, all of the stuff that I spoke about is just my opinion. It's probably wrong and you might have a different opinion, so please go easy on me, but let's discuss it in the comments. Anyhoozle, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.